Jefferson High had a reputation: rowdy students, pranks that broke spirits, and teachers who lasted only weeks before burnout forced them out. But nobody expected what happened on that ordinary Monday morning when a new face walked into room 104. They called her Ms. Harper, a young woman with quiet eyes, dressed modest and professional. Nothing about her suggested anything but calm competence. But in a school where bullies ruled the hallways, calm was a dangerous mask to wear. The moment a teenager lunged at her, grabbed her arm in mid-hallway, the atmosphere shifted. He expected fear. He got force. With a single swift motion, he was airborne, crashing down onto polished tile. The hallway froze. The students gasped. That flip. It wasn't just physical. It was a signal that something had changed forever. Martial arts experts have long said that self-defense training builds more than reflexes. It builds confidence and respect, teaching people to stand strong when others would retreat. As the school reeled from that moment, people began to wonder, what was Ms. Harper really capable of? And why had she stepped into this school, of all places, ready for confrontation? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you fight for justice and you think the Bullies has no rights to humiliate the young teacher, hit the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. But if you think they have every rights to humiliate her without cause, comment your thoughts below. And don't forget to share the video to those who also fights for justice. I remember standing in that hallway afterward, heart pounding, palms slick with sweat, as the echoes of that flip faded against the linoleum. I'm telling you, I felt shock. But somewhere under that pulse of fear was relief, like a weight had lifted. My mind kept circling the same questions. Why here? Why this school? Why now? Because Jefferson High wasn't just any school. It was a place where teachers walked on eggshells, where nearly half of instructors report feeling threatened, anxious, even attacked by students. The moment had cracked everything open. I couldn't stop thinking about Ms. Harper. At 27, she carried herself with quiet steel. She lit a room, but there was more behind those calm eyes. And then there were Derek, Tyler, and Mason, the sons of local power, brazen, untouchable. They didn't just tease. They bent rules, broke spirits. I needed to know. What drove these boys? What pushed her to walk into the lion's den? I remember the cracked chalkboard from math class, the mess of whispered speculation among staff. Every bulletin board and backdoor meeting brimmed with tension. I saw, just for a second, a military ID tucked in a lanyard ghosting behind her lesson plans, blurry but full of meaning. Why would someone with that kind of past choose to teach at a place like this? My chest tightened as I asked myself, was it courage, revenge, or something deeper, something she needed to confront inside herself? I felt her stare the day after the hallway incident, like she was both shaken and electric. And inside, I wondered, what secret lay beneath that calm exterior? What had made her ready for this? So these are the questions we're chasing with this story. Why did she step into this chaos? What did she see in Jefferson High that made her stand her ground? And why did those boys go so far, thinking she was just another victim? Stay with me, because what we uncover next is far more than just a confrontation. It's a reckoning, laid bare. I felt the tension in my chest tighten as I watched her unpack that duffel bag on day one. Every breath she took seemed calculated, each movement purposeful. I could sense that this was more than just a new job. As she pulled out a framed photo of a man in uniform, her father, I felt her grief whisper across the room. She paused. I felt the weight of her sorrow. She placed it on her desk, as if inviting a memory into the chaos of a school where hope got stomped on daily. I saw her unfold one more thing. A black belt, worn, creased, folded beside her lesson planner. It wasn't for show. I felt a shiver of recognition. I'd seen that look before, the same fire in the eyes of veterans returning home, shaped by discipline and conflict. People with that background, according to education researchers, bring structure, emotional steadiness, a fierce sense of purpose into the classroom. And just like that, something shifted. Because Jefferson High was hard. Nearly half of U.S. public schools faced chronic teacher shortages, 44% at one point. Because teachers couldn't handle the pressure, the burnout, the behavioral chaos. I could feel it in every cracked locker, every slammed locker, every exchange drained of hope. I imagined Ms. Harper had seen it too. Maybe she had felt the sting of weakness creeping in, had watched hope rewind until it snapped. She was 27, a veteran of close-quarters defense, forged in the heat of Marine training. I sensed the betrayal she felt when the world she once believed in asked her to make peace with her past, then dumped her into a job where a teacher was lucky to survive a week unscathed. I saw her heart tremble, as if torn between duty and fear. She had come here to create peace where pain had lived, a maxim she painted across her mind when she left the service. Hurt, healing, human, hoping. But here, she stepped into a war zone. And those boys, Derek, Tyler, Mason, weren't just students. They were sons of influence, untouchable, entrenched. Derek commanded the group, Tyler filmed their every move, and Mason was muscle. I felt a tightening in my throat, imagining their power, the grown-ups they could turn to, the silence they could buy. But she had brought something they hadn't counted on, her past and the strength she'd buried deep inside. And as she let that black belt sit beside her planner, I felt the first crack appear in the school system. I felt her readiness to stand. The magnetism pulled me closer to what was coming next. Because her story wasn't over in room 104, it was just beginning. I stepped into room 104 and the tension hit me like a weight, heavy, unspoken. Fake notes started appearing on her desk. Go back to where you came from. Teach us something useful like cleaning toilets. They weren't just mean, they were surgical, designed to cut her confidence. I felt a hollow in my chest watching her read them with calm eyes, like she was storing each word away, learning from them. I heard about her tires being slashed in the staff parking lot, the hiss of air escaping, the deflated rubber echoing down the concrete. Another silent act meant to scare her. Then came the food, dumped on her chair at lunch, the glop of it dripping, the stink of disrespect filling the empty air. In that moment, I recognized a pattern reported by educators. Teachers are being targeted more and more, verbal threats, invasion of personal space, even property damage like slashed tires. It was personal, and it was precise. My chest tightened when I first heard about Mason blocking her path in the hallway. I pictured him leaning in, sneering, an image that triggered a visceral memory of helplessness from my own past. But this wasn't me. This was her. I could almost hear the mocking thought. What are you going to do? Teach me a lesson? And I realized how loud those words were in the silence before the storm. She didn't hesitate. I saw it in her mind. Calm redirection, muscle memory from years in the Marines. She turned his grip inside out, twisted. I felt awe mix with deep relief. That flip wasn't a spectacle. It was a reclaiming of power, something taught in martial arts. Regain control, neutralize without harm, speak through action. And in that split second, Mason was airborne, his impact punctuating a new era at Jefferson High. The hallway erupted, gasps, phones clicking on, whispers swirling like leaves. I felt the walls inch closer, the air shift. That moment stayed suspended long after Mason hit the floor. But here's what no one realized in that breath. This wasn't the first time she'd done something like that. I sensed her past circling, echoes of training drills, late nights warding off ghosts in barracks, facing moments when backing down meant death. She carried those echoes into that hallway, and while the school saw a flip, I felt the weight of something deeper. A woman standing on the threshold of her own truth, breaking cycles of fear, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever felt powerless. You ever sit with a truth so long it start to rot inside you? Not because it ain't real, but because nobody ever believed it when you said it out loud. That's what those days felt like after it happened. After Ms. Rodriguez flipped Mason like he weighed nothing. That hallway? It got quiet real quick, like it knew it just witnessed something sacred. Or dangerous. Depends on who you ask. The video made its way around town before the final bell even rang. By the time I got home, it was already on 3 Facebook pages and 2 local news blogs. At first, folks were confused. No one expected that kind of control, that calm precision, from a woman who'd just been wiping chili off her chair 2 days before. But that's the thing about Ms. Rodriguez. She never showed up for approval. She showed up for justice. Now let me tell you what it felt like for me, watching it all unfold. Not from the outside, but from the inside, from the cracks where stories like mine get swept under. I'd been silent for too long. I saw my own history in the way they tried to turn that moment against her. 'Cause see, once that video spread, people got loud. Some called her a hero. Said finally, someone put those boys in check. Others? They said she was unstable, dangerous, a threat to the kids. But let's be honest, they meant a threat to the boys, the sons of men who played golf with judges, who donated to campaigns, who could sink you with one phone call and resurrect you with another. And that school board, they folded like paper. Meetings got called, warnings got issued, not to the boys, not to the ones leaving notes and slicing tires. To her, they told her she needed to de-escalate better, that physicality violated policy. I remember sitting in that auditorium with my stomach twisting. Her eyes didn't flinch once. She took their words like bricks, stacking them in silence. But I saw her hand on that black belt in her lap. Not wearing it, just holding it, like a tether back to who she really was. Then came the media. Lord, they fed off it like buzzards. Violent veteran turned teacher. That was one headline. Another called her a disciplinary threat. But then there were others. Jefferson's protector. Woman who stood her ground. It was like the whole town split down the middle, and I stood in the middle of that crack, wondering which side had enough soul to see the truth. And just when it looked like she was about to lose her job, something shifted. It started with whispers. A few parents speaking up. Not loud, not on camera, just quiet calls to the school board. They said their kids had stories too. About Derek making threats, Tyler filming girls in the locker room, Mason throwing punches and laughing while teachers looked the other way. One mother brought in screenshots, another brought a torn-up backpack. And suddenly, the light they tried to aim at her started bending back toward them. But the biggest shift? That came from someone nobody ever noticed. The janitor. I ain't even know his name till then. Always moving quiet, mop in hand, earbuds in. Turns out, he saw the whole hallway incident, start to finish. Said he'd seen the build-up too, every little act of cruelty, every sneer, every time they tried to push her past her breaking point. And he kept receipts, literal notes, photos, timestamps. He handed them to the board in a sealed envelope. Now here's where things got wild. The school board, they tried to bury it, called it unsubstantiated, said the janitor wasn't a reliable witness. But the truth don't rot when it's held by enough hands. One of the parents, being a lawyer, caught wind. She subpoenaed the security footage, filed a motion, and just like that, the game changed. They wanted to expel Ms. Rodriguez. That was their plan. Paint her like a rogue soldier who brought combat to the classroom. But this lawyer, she flipped the script, said if the board moved forward, they'd be slapped with a civil suit so hard it'd rattle their grandkids' And I remember sitting in that second hearing. Ms. Rodriguez wore the same outfit she wore her first day. Black slacks, white blouse, that thin gold chain with her father's dog tags tucked underneath. But this time, she wasn't sitting in silence. She stood. And I swear to God, when she started speaking, it was like the room stopped breathing. She talked about what it meant to serve, not just in the Marines, but in a classroom. About how every student, even the ones who hated her, deserved better than fear and silence. About how the system protects bullies when their last name carries weight. and about how she wasn't going to be another teacher who packed up and ran. She said, "You can fire me, but I won't be erased." That line hit different. Still echoes in my mind. Now, I ain't saying everything got fixed after that. The board didn't apologize, the principal still kept his distance. But they couldn't fire her. Not after all that came to light. And slowly, real slow, people started seeing what she was really about. Not fear, not violence, just strength. Earned, scarred, tested. And me? I started writing again. First just little poems, then essays, then this story. Because I realized, silence don't protect you, it protects them. And Ms. Rodriguez, she ain't just taught math. She taught us how to fight without swinging, how to stand without shouting, how to walk through fire and come out holding someone else's hand. That hallway ain't the same no more. Kids still act up, sure, but they think twice. And that chalkboard, the one that used to be cracked down the middle, it's whole now. 'Cause sometimes the biggest lesson a teacher gives don't come from a book. It comes from surviving and teaching others how to do the same. Have you ever carried a secret so heavy it made your chest feel like a locked box full of stones? Not 'cause it was shameful, but because the truth inside it was just too raw, too real for most people to handle. That's how I carried this part. Quiet, careful, like breaking it open might crack something in me I'd never get back. See, after the video went out and the noise got loud, the think pieces, the gossip, the school board's cold letters, things shifted. Not all at once, but like storm clouds inching in while the rest of the town pretended the sky was still blue. That's when the security footage dropped. It wasn't supposed to come out. That school had a tight grip on anything that might tarnish their reputation, a word they threw around like a shield, even while kids like me were drowning under it. But somebody, maybe the janitor, maybe someone in IT with a conscience, leaked the hallway tape. And what it showed? It didn't lie. Mason shoved first. No provocation, no warning, just violence, raw and entitled, like he believed he was above consequence. The camera caught Ms. Rodriguez taking a single step back, not flinching, not lashing out, just grounding herself, like she'd been trained to in darker places than that school could imagine. And then she moved, not like a brawler, like a protector. Firm, but never cruel. Controlled, not chaotic. That footage hit the internet like thunder. Folks started changing their tune. Some of the same ones who'd called her dangerous were now whispering, well, maybe it wasn't how they first said. But what cracked the ground wide open was Tyler. That boy ain't know how to keep his mouth shut. Or maybe he thought the world would always clean up behind him. But he'd been bragging to somebody. Over text, over DMs, I don't know. All I know is those messages got out. He said they planned it. Said Mason was gonna provoke her while Tyler filmed it low-key. Said they were gonna finally get rid of the bitch. His words. Said she thought she was untouchable, but they had something for her. When I read that, my stomach turned. Not from surprise, but from confirmation. 'Cause deep down, I knew. We all did. The way they moved, the way they watched her, it was calculated. This wasn't just bullying. This was a setup, a takedown, a hit disguised as high school drama. And still, through it all, Ms. Rodriguez never broke. I remember the court date like it's burned into my skin. Gray sky hanging low, wet leaves stuck to my shoes as I walked up the courthouse steps. The benches inside were packed. Parents, students, board members, reporters with empty eyes and sharp pens. But the silence, it was thick. Like the whole room could feel this was bigger than a teacher in a shove. This was about power, about fear, about what happens when you try to stand in the gap and protect people nobody else sees. When Ms. Rodriguez took the stand, she didn't cry. She didn't shout. She told her story like it was stitched into her bones. She spoke of her father, the kind of man who taught her the weight of every word and the cost of every silence. She told him about the war zones she served in, and the invisible ones she walked into every morning at that school. She said she didn't come to Jefferson for a paycheck. She came for change. And when she talked about us, about the kids the system had forgotten, Her voice cracked, just once, but it was enough to tear open the room. You could feel it then, the shift, the jury leaning forward, parents bowing their heads. Even some of the reporters stopped taking notes. 'Cause what she gave them wasn't a defense, it was a confession of care. And when the verdict came, not guilty, fully cleared, district at fault, I swear I heard air rush back into the room like someone had lifted a weight none of us knew we were holding. But the part that broke me wasn't the verdict. It was what happened after. We were spilling out into the lobby, the kind of mess you get when emotions and flashbulbs collide. And that's when I saw her, Mason's mama, standing real still by the wall, pale scarf over her head, eyes puffy but focused. She walked straight over to Ms. Rodriguez, slow and steady, didn't yell, didn't apologize. She just leaned in, and I swear I saw her hand shake when she whispered, "You did what I couldn't. Thank you." Then she turned and walked away, coat swinging like a flag in the wind. That moment, it hollowed me out. 'Cause for all Mason's rage, all his cruelty, I realized that day even his mother had been living under something heavy, something unspeakable. Maybe fear, maybe guilt, maybe both. Ms. Rodriguez just stood there, holding her own breath, eyes closed for a second too long. Like maybe she heard more in that whisper than any of us ever could. That's the thing about people like her. They carry more than we'll ever see. And sometimes their justice don't look like victory. Sometimes it looks like surviving. Like walking out whole when the world tried to carve you up. From that day on, things did start changing. Not everywhere, but in ways that mattered. The school board faced heat. Real heat. Parents showed up louder, policies got reviewed, and a quiet little scholarship fund popped up a year later. For students who stand in the face of silence, no name attached, but we knew who planted that seed in me. I kept watching, kept learning, kept writing. 'Cause what Ms. Rodriguez gave us wasn't just protection, it was permission to tell the truth, to survive it, to make sure no one gets swallowed by silence again. I never thought healing could feel like mourning, like grieving the old version of yourself you had to leave behind just to make it out whole. But that's what those next months felt like. A slow, quiet funeral for the scared boy I used to be. The one who used to flinch at every slur, every shove, every moment my worth was questioned in plain view of people who swore they cared. Seeing Ms. Rodriguez walk back into that building after the trial was like watching the sunrise over a battlefield. Everything was still broken, but the light was back. She didn't strut, didn't throw no victory party. She just walked. Same calm face, same steady eyes, like she wasn't returning to prove anything. Just picking up where she left off. But we saw it. The shift. You could feel it in the way the hallway air carried itself different. Like it had exhaled something heavy. Some of the bullies didn't come back. Maybe they transferred. Maybe their parents couldn't handle the spotlight. Tyler vanished altogether. I heard his family moved out west. Mason? He was still around, but quieter. Smaller. Like his world had shrunk. But what hit me the hardest was us. The students. Something in us stood a little straighter. You ever seen a kid who used to walk with their shoulders caved in suddenly discover the strength in their spine? That's what it looked like. We weren't scared no more. Or maybe we were, but we knew how to carry it different. Like it didn't have to own us. Some of us started staying after school, helping clean up, volunteering in ways we never used to. A group of us, me included, even asked if we could start a martial arts club. Not for violence, for discipline, for confidence. We named it The Stand. Ms. Rodriguez became our faculty sponsor. She never taught us how to throw a punch. She taught us how to breathe through tension, how to move with purpose, how to keep your center when the world tries to shove you off balance. That club changed us. We came in timid. We left every session feeling like we had armor on the inside. Even teachers started changing. Staff meetings got different, less condescending, more listening. It wasn't overnight. Some of the old guard still clung to their authority like it was a crown. But others, they started speaking up. They started asking, what are we doing for these kids besides just scoring them? I even saw one teacher pass a note to Ms. Rodriguez once. Not a student, a teacher. And you could tell from the way her hand trembled that she was apologizing for not standing up sooner. It was like the building had exhaled shame and was finally breathing in courage. The bathrooms got cleaned more. The broken lockers got fixed. The security guards started acting more like protectors and less like threats. Even the posters on the wall changed. One day I walked by and saw a new one going up outside the library. You belong here. 3 words. But when you ain't never felt like you belonged, that's a whole sermon. I remember one rainy Tuesday, a younger kid, real quiet, used to get picked on bad, came to me after practice and asked if I ever used to be scared walking into class. I told him, every day. He nodded and said, me too, but it feels better now. That's when I realized this wasn't about Ms. Rodriguez anymore. It was about what she planted. See, there's a kind of power that don't need a mic or a stage or a badge. The kind that moves like roots under concrete, invisible, steady, and unstoppable. That's what she gave us. Not noise, not revenge, but resilience. And the crazy thing, she never talked about the trial again. Never once brought it up. No gloating, no bitterness. She just kept teaching, kept calling us by name, kept showing up like the storm never touched her. But you could see it in her eyes, that the fire had cost her something. You don't walk through that kind of heat and come out unchanged. Her voice was a little softer now, her steps a little slower. But her presence, it hit harder than ever. She taught us Shakespeare with the same fire she taught us self-respect. Broke down systems of power the same way she broke down sentence structure. She found ways to weave justice into every lesson, like it was a language we'd all forgotten we could speak. And when people ask me now, what really changed that school? I don't say her name like she's some legend. I say it like a prayer. Because in a place where fear used to rule, one woman's quiet strength reshaped everything. She didn't just fight back, she transformed. And I think back to that first day, when I watched her walk into school holding that old leather briefcase, the one with the worn handle and the scratch down the side. People thought it was full of lesson plans. But now I know. That briefcase, it was full of principles, not the kind you memorize for a test. The kind you live, the kind that cost you, the kind that make people uncomfortable before they make them better. And if I learned anything from watching her, it's this. Real power, it ain't loud, it don't need an audience, it don't flex, it don't bully, it's silent, steady, earned. And when it moves, when it really moves, it don't just protect the vulnerable, it makes them powerful, it builds new roots in the ground. And sometimes, if you listen real close, you can hear it growing. Have you ever trusted someone so much, only to realize they never really saw you? That's how it felt, standing there in that cold linoleum hallway, breathing in the stale scent of industrial cleaner and cafeteria grease, watching it all unfold like I wasn't even real, like I was just some background extra in a story written by people who never cared to know my name. It started with the slap, not the one that made headlines, not the courtroom drama. I'm talking about the real slap, the invisible kind, the kind that don't leave a mark on your skin but bruises your soul in places nobody can see. When Ms. Elena Rodriguez got dragged out of that building, when they shoved her forward like she was a criminal instead of a protector, that was the first time I felt it. The sting of betrayal. Not just by people, but by systems. Systems I had been forced to trust since I was old enough to raise my hand and ask to use the bathroom. And I remember the silence after she left. Not just the kind you hear, the kind you feel. Classrooms got quieter. Laughter turned thin. Eyes didn't meet no more. The hallways that once echoed with sneakers and locker doors and too loud cuss words, they felt hollow, like somebody had cracked the spine of the school and drained the marrow out. And me? I went numb. Because when someone fights for you, really fights, and then gets punished for it, you start questioning everything. You start wondering if speaking up is worth it or if silence is the only thing that'll keep you safe. But safety? Safety ain't what it seems when you already walk around with your shoulders tucked and your voice buried. The weeks that followed were a blur. No one said her name. It was like she had never existed. Like the woman who stood between me and a steel trash can while 3 boys called me roach and welfare baby was just a figment of my imagination. But I remembered. I remembered how she looked at us, not through us. How she made us rewrite our essays until our voices sounded like our own, not some fancy version of ourselves we thought might be more acceptable. She didn't tolerate excellence where she expected it, not in test scores but in dignity. And that expectation, it hurt sometimes. Because when you've been told your whole life that your voice ain't valuable, learning to speak like it matters is terrifying. It's like learning to walk again after years of limping. But she stayed with us, long after school hours, long after the bell stopped ringing, long after the rest of the world clocked out on us, until they took her. And when they did, it didn't just shake me, it hollowed me out. I stopped participating. I started letting the jokes slide. I laughed when they called me token, just so they'd stop looking at me like I didn't belong. I let the parts of me that were different get quiet, real quiet. But silence don't save you. All it does is starve the part of you that knows better. And then, something happened. A flyer went up in the gym, white paper, bold letters. Public hearing, Elena Rodriguez case. It was taped crooked like someone didn't want it to stay up. But it stayed. And when that day came, people showed up, not teachers, not administrators, us, students. Black, brown, queer, poor, angry, scared. All of us. We sat in that gym with our backs straight and our voices ready. And for the first time in a long time, we were loud. Not disrespectful. Loud. The kind of loud that comes from knowing truth when the world tries to bury it under policy and pretense. The hearing didn't last long. But the impact, that's still echoing. Ms. Rodriguez came back. Not as a martyr, not as a symbol, as herself. And she carried that same worn leather briefcase like nothing had changed, even though everything had. She didn't give speeches, she didn't gloat, but you could feel her power when she stepped into a room. The bullies didn't disappear, but they stopped being bold. Like they knew the ground they stood on was no longer soft and complicit. Some transferred, some got quieter. One even started bringing in food donations every Friday like he was trying to earn back some kind of grace. And me? I started writing again, not just essays, letters, to kids who felt invisible, to my future self, to the version of me that almost gave up. I wrote until my pen ran out, and then I borrowed more. The school changed in small ways, but it wasn't just the walls, it was the climate, the very air. Teachers held space differently. Students made eye contact. People started saying, "I see you," and actually meaning it. A martial arts club got started, not for show, for centering, for breathing, for holding space for anger that needed a healthy place to go. I joined. I wore that uniform like armor, stitched with intention. Ms. Rodriguez showed up to our first showcase. She clapped like we were champions, even though none of us won any awards. Because we didn't need medals. We had something better, a sense of self we hadn't felt before she showed us what it looked like to stand up, even when it costs you. And now, years later, whenever someone asks what justice looks like, I don't point to laws or headlines or policies. I point to a hallway. I point to a briefcase. I point to a woman who stayed. Because in a place where fear used to rule, one woman's quiet strength reshaped everything. She didn't just hold the line, she was the line. And I've learned that the strongest voices ain't always the loudest. Sometimes they speak in small acts of defiance. Sometimes they whisper truth until it's undeniable. That briefcase she carried, it wasn't full of lesson plans, it was full of principles. And maybe real power ain't something you wield. Maybe it's something you earn by choosing to care when it's easier to look away. Have you ever seen someone stand up to injustice like that? What would you have done if you were in that hallway? Let us know in the comments. Do schools need more discipline or more understanding? And if you thought this story was wild, wait till you hear what one janitor uncovered beneath the gym floor. Subscribe so you don't miss the next real-life justice twist.